Today we're here for me to share you some tips and tricks around how to get your teams to lead productive requirements workshops. So I want it to be really interactive. You'll get to get hands-on at certain stages throughout this workshop just to get experience what it's like to have an experience like this. And the reason that I've done this sort of topic around productive workshops is that I had a conversation with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and this person's is an amazing consultant, technically very, very, very good with Power Platform and Dynamics, really good with the clients, can build really good relationships, but was just struggling with his workshops and couldn't understand why. So we had a bit of a discussion, and what it boiled down to was that he was just doing way too much in his workshops. As the facilitator, he was leading the workshops, he was asking all the questions, he was writing notes, drawing diagrams, taking screenshots of things, and then also being the technical expert all at the same time. And what that kind of really resulted in is him just being completely exhausted by the end of the workshop. He'd have to kind of rewatch recordings to check his notes. He did have a couple of colleagues with him in his workshops, but they kind of just sat there and took a few notes, but didn't have much input or help him out much at all. And so yeah, it's just really ineffective way of running workshops, and he'd kind of come out of the back of them wondering, did he actually capture all the information that he needed to? And just generally, quite exhausted with all of it. And so what we talked about, and I guess for him in his particular scenario, was that he didn't really kind of set any expectations up front. He didn't, for his colleagues that were in the workshop, he didn't tell them like kind of what their roles and responsibilities were in the workshop. Same with the clients or the stakeholders that were there as well, and didn't have any kind of structure to it. So didn't have any way to guide the people through the workshop and get them to actively engage. So a lot of that's what I'm going to be showing you today is, how do you set those expectations and how do you get people to actively engage in a workshop. So what I want to do as a bit of a warm up, I just want to get a feel for what's your level of experience with Miro at the moment. So this is a really kind of, it's part of that setting expectations exercise. I want you to grab a dot, and people are doing it already. Well done. Grab a dot and put it on the scale. Probably more near the Ninja end, but probably not. There's always so much to learn with Miro. Okay. Cool. So we've got a good range, still a lot. This is some of the workshop I ran a little while ago. A lot of people at the beginner end, and that's completely fine. I'm trying to make this as smooth as possible. What's For those who are at the beginner end, I did send through, usually what I sometimes do for the participants is send through a bit of a tutorial on how to use Miro if I know they're going to be beginners. So for you who are new to this, a couple of tips. If you hold your right mouse button and drag, you can drag the screen around with you, and you can kind of navigate around. To interact with things, you use the right mouse button, which you would have found to find the dots, and you can move dots around. I've locked down a lot of features. So, for example, if you click on the ninja, you can't move it or edit it. And the other thing we work a lot with is with sticky notes. So I'll have sticky notes on the board for you to interact with, but also across on the left-hand side, there is a kind of a toolbar which you can grab a sticky note from there and add it to the board and just type your notes in there. So it's all fairly basic, and those are the basics of Miro, but hopefully enough to kind of get you through today. And then what I'm doing today in terms of this experience of bringing you along with me, there's a whole bunch of pretty awesome facilitation tools within the system that helps guide you and your participants through a workshop. So I want to go to the screen here and just want to know, what has brought you to the workshop today. So this is just a bit of a brainstorming exercise, just to get us warmed up, used to using sticky notes. And I just want to, know, what brought you here and what do you want to get out of this workshop today. I've had a few conversations with a few of you on LinkedIn, and it's been really, really insightful to see, a lot of people have got the similar sorts of problems and challenges and things that they want to work on their workshops. So I'll give you maybe another kind of 30 seconds or so to finish that off. We don't need to spend too much time on this, but just to kind of get a good idea. I'm just going to have a bit of a read through now. A lot of people I saw, being at the beginner end of Miro in terms of experience. A lot of people just want to get some tips and tricks on how to use Miro itself. So hopefully you'll get a few of those today. And people, obviously want to make workshops more interactive. The intro summary covered exactly why I'm here. That's good. And so I've got a good topic. Cool. I'm going to be very quick on my introduction about myself. For those who don't know me, I think a lot of you have kind of come through here through LinkedIn, so you probably know a bit about me already. But I've done a lot of work in the Dynamics and Power Platform space over the last 15 years, and have recently, well, it's probably about 4 years ago now, went out on my own as a kind of a solo independent consultant, specializing more around in Power Platform adoption and design. So I consider these workshops design, and I do a lot of design workshops for clients. And then just talking to people, realize that a lot of people have the same frustrations and that I used to have, especially moving into an online world. How do we run workshops effectively? And so I've done a whole lot of training on design thinking, design sprints, workshop facilitation, and put together my own framework that I use with clients to facilitate workshops in Miro. And so I've put together a training course and a framework around all of this because I think it'll benefit other people as well. So that's a bit of background about me. But what we're going to do today is, I think there's 5 really key elements around in an effective workshop or a productive workshop. The first one is that we need to get everyone who's going to be involved in these workshops aligned on a purpose. So why are we here? Why are we doing them? Setting expectations I've talked about already. It's super important. I'm going to show you how we go about doing that. Identifying the participants. So having the right participants in a workshop is, for me, probably one of the most important things. If you get the wrong people in the workshop, then all of a sudden you're just gathering the wrong requirements. It's not going to lead to a good solution at the end, or or the optimal solution. So number 3 is probably one of the most important things. And then even when you've gathered the right people for your workshop, you've got to be able to get everyone to have their say. And I think we've all been in those scenarios where you have 1 or 2 people in the workshop who are very vocal, they dominate, and no one else gets to speak. And the last one is really a guided framework or a way of running workshops that guide the participants through a process and collects the information that you need to collect and have them engaged. Right, so if we start off with the first one, which is a line on purpose. And what I do here is I've got a thing called a solution canvas. And basically what the solution canvas is a 1-page document that basically plans out the design for a Power Platform or a Dynamics 365 solution. And I'll skip through to what that looks like. And in terms of setting up for a bunch of workshops, what I use the solution canvas for is I basically make sure we can get the first row of the solution canvas answered, all those questions answered, which really explains, why are we here as an organization, as a business, what are we trying to achieve with the solution that we're designing and the workshops that we're running requirements for, and then also identifying who are the users and who are the stakeholders. And so we go through that, and that kind of just helps set the scene around why are we here and what's the purpose of these workshops and what we're here to do. So I'm not going to go through how to fill this in today. I have got a blog article on this to just guide you through this process. But just for today's workshop and just conscious of time, what I'd like us to kind of focus on as our purpose of being here is try and answer this question around how might we empower our team with the skills to facilitate effective requirements gathering workshops. So I like us to have that as our, I guess, North Star or guiding light for this workshop today. Right, so the second one is around setting expectations. And I'll probably breeze through the section quite quickly because I do want to have hands-on and getting interactive on this. And so in terms of set expectations, I have a whole bunch of slides like this, which just outline what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it in these workshops, because a lot of these concepts are quite different and quite new to a few people. So I start off with this first of all explaining what is the workshop about. It's amazing how many workshops sometimes you go to and the facilitator has not explained what it's actually about and what we're here to do. So for us today, there's a couple of things we're going to be doing. I'm going to be showing you how to run an effective workshop online and gather information. And then we as a group will workshop that question around how to empower our team to facilitate effective workshops. So that's why we're here. And then I'm going to go into a few slides around how these workshops work. And when it comes to the story I told you about my friend, one of the things he didn't do was set, what are the roles and responsibilities? And I have three very clear roles. One is the decider. So in a workshop like we're doing now, it's we're working as a group and we're going to decide on things as a group. But sometimes, as a group, we can't always come to a decision. And so instead of getting stuck and not making any progress, we want to just make a decision and move forward. And so we have a person called the decider who will be the tiebreaker if we can't move forward. And usually that is, the project sponsor, if it's decisions around money or finances or value of the project, or the product owner if it's more to do with the product itself and the features and the functions of the solution. Then we have the experts. So these are the people in the room. So for today, it's all of you. You're an expert or have knowledge around our topic of facilitating workshops, whether you're here to learn more or you already are an expert and you just want to get some tips. You are considered the experts in this space. You're the people that we're designing for. And that's every one of you. And you all have a role to play in this, and you will be writing your ideas and notes down on sticky notes. And as we go through some of the exercises, I'll guide you through what you need to do. Then the last one is the facilitator. So today it's me. In terms of the story I told you about my friend, he didn't set it clear that he was the facilitator. And the facilitator's main role is just to lead the workshop. They're not an expert. They shouldn't be writing all the notes. They shouldn't be taking all the screenshots. They shouldn't be doing everything. They're really here just to ask the questions, interview people, and facilitate the workshop. And those was what they should be focusing on most, instead of doing absolutely everything else, because it just, it makes it really hard to facilitate a good workshop. The other thing I introduced is workshop principles. And so these are the things that make these workshops, types of workshops I'm showing you, really successful. We have a structured process. So you'll see on this board here, I'm taking you through a whole series of steps. It's all very structured. Sometimes it feels a little bit weird and you may not be used to it. So we have a saying of just trust the process. It's there for a reason, and that the outcomes are usually really good. We want to minimize discussions. So some people like to talk a lot in workshops. And so if we're getting off topic, and we know people always get off topic, we will minimize those discussions, and we may interrupt people and say, hey, we're not on topic, we need to move forward. Together alone. So this is one around getting everyone to have their say, and we use sticky notes as our voice. So instead of having just kind of open discussions and people talking, which can be really, really time consuming to get everyone to have their say, we use sticky notes as their voice. And then finally, we do have a saying around progress over perfection. So, and when we're writing down our ideas or on sticky notes, we just want to get our ideas down as quickly as possible and not worry about, trying to get them absolutely perfect. We actually want to make progress through these workshops, and not kind of get stalled on trying to make things completely perfect. All right. I think it's in terms of time, I'll skip through this slide, but really this one here, in terms of setting invitations, is around how because some of the stuff is quite new. Sorry, my screen's just frozen a bit. Here we go. And then the last thing we do around expectations is to set the ground rules. So a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory, but sometimes you just gonna have to lay them out in terms of, if do you have a policy? I mean, these are just examples, but do you have a policy on having your cameras on? I'm not too fussed about it, but definitely expect people to be 100% present in these workshops and not doing other things on always good to set some ground rules as well. Okay, so once I've gone through all the expectations setting, obviously I do this at the start of a set of workshops, but I also do a lot of these expectation settings, in the lead up to the workshop as well, in terms of the communications you have with the people that are participating, the emails you send them, the meeting invites, those sorts of things. So the next one is around identifying participants, and I've got to be very quick through this because I do want you to get hands-on. I've got some hands-on stuff coming up soon. One of the biggest things I find with workshops and why they fail is because the wrong people are in the workshops. And if you think about today who we're designing for, and we go back to that statement of how might we empower our team to facilitate effective workshops, the people we're designing for are, just an example, but consultants, or basically anyone running work, for facilitating or running workshops. So those are people that we're designing for. And then also there'll be a few of you here who are probably team leaders or managers. So in this exercise here, I do with clients is we just start mapping out who are the people that we're designing for. So who are the people that are critical or that we're using our end solution, and then who are the stakeholders? Who else are the other people involved? They have a stake in this, but they're not necessarily the people that we using the solution that we're building. And usually what happens on this map here is this is filled with different sticky notes of different stakeholders. And we just go through and we just tag a few people with different things around who's a fan, who's a skeptic, who do we need to get on our side to make this a good solution. And then finally, who do we invite to the workshops? And typically what I find is that if we were to do a workshop on topic that we're doing today, we would invite team leaders and managers and would often maybe leave out the people we're actually designing for. And that happens a lot in workshops where maybe doing a customer service project, you would get the customer service manager into the workshops, but not always the customer service agents or representatives who are actually the ones, in front of the client. So my rule is, in terms of who you invite to the workshops, you must invite the people you're designing for. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that on this next slide. And that what I find is that when we are doing requirements for business applications, we do often set it, start off with the business goals and what are we here to achieve for the business. And then we kind of almost skip through to, well, what's the solution for it? We're going to use an app or Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform or whatever. And we get very focused on the solution and we often just skip over the users, what are their needs and what they do, how do they achieve the business goals. And I feel like we miss this middle layer out completely. And that's kind of a lot of what I focus on in terms of running requirements workshops, is it's really very much targeted around the end user who will be using our solution at the end of the day. And those will drive the requirements for the solution at the end. I find, also often we're very focused on the solution and how do we implement it rather than focusing at the user itself. So to get you involved again, I just want you to brainstorm a little bit, take some sticky notes here, and I'd like just to write down, what happens and just reflect on your previous projects. But what happens if you don't focus on user requirements or you don't include the end users in your requirements gathering or design? What happens, when you get to UAT or testing, user adoption? How's that if you don't have them as a focus point and involved in the design? And also you have to think about, what projects for you have gone well and which ones haven't gone so well, and think about what was the level of engagement at the requirement stage of the people who would be the end users. I'll just give you a couple of minutes there. I'm just going to check the comments here while you're going away. So Alex has got a really good question here in the chat around, as a facilitator, how many colleagues do you typically have taking notes? It typically depends on what the focus of the workshop is, but typically I'd like to have at least one other colleague with me, someone who will be from the project team will be involved in other configurations, maybe another functional consultant, but even developers as well, so they can get a feel of, understanding of the users and their requirements in the business as well. So they're there for two reasons: to take notes and participate in the workshops, but also to get familiar and understanding of the users. And in terms of, I guess, Alex, it's not, in terms of the way I run workshops, it's not just your colleagues taking notes, it's actually your clients. If you're a consultant, it's your clients. If you work in-house, it's the business people. Like, everyone takes notes, as we're doing right here. And that's really key, because you get, a diverse bunch of ideas. So cool. Thank you for putting these notes. I'm just reading through them here. Encourage you to have a bit of a read too. But yeah, a lot of these are all very common, right? Yeah, the free of charge time that you have to spend to fix issues, sorry. Yeah, unhappy clients because they think, you haven't delivered what they said they would, and I think a lot of time there's a lot of miscommunication here. Yeah, we open ourselves for team leaders and managers steering the design. There's a really good one, and that can be quite a hard one to overcome, because team leaders and managers, they want to, it's their little baby. They want to be in control. They're usually responsible for the outcomes, and they mean really well. I think they have good intentions, but at the end of the day, they are not the person who is in front of the customer using the solution, and there is a little bit of a gap. And I've never found a team leader or manager who can, you know, help us get all the requirements for their users. So you have to go to the person themselves that we're using the solution. Great, thank you for that. So what I want you to do now, this is just to kind of highlight having diversity in your workshops. I just want you to then take a dot today, and in your job role, where do you classify yourself? Are you someone who facilitates the workshop, so someone we're designing for in that stakeholder map, or are you a team lead manager role? Or if you're an other, I'd just love you to put a sticky note there saying why are you, or what else, what kind of sort of other role do you have, or why else are you here for this? And you can be halfway between. You can be a manager of a team, and you can also be someone who facilitates workshops as well. Yeah. Cool. I'll see a few people are going in there. This is where you notice the people who are doing two things at once. Here we go. People are starting to get into it now. Cool. Excellent. So I thought we would have a bit more of a diverse range. But what is, I guess, really encouraging for this is to say, if we were doing this as a real workshop with clients, great to see that the bulk of the people are here in the middle. These are the people that we are designing for today. We're trying to come up with ideas of how to enable them to run effective workshops. Right. Okay, so the next part of this, and this is the fourth bit, is around enabling everyone to have their say. So this is where we're going to actually do a proper bit of a workshop. We've got 20 minutes left, so we'll spend a bit of time here on this one. I'll even introduce a timer as well. I'll set it going now. 10 minutes is quite a long time. So this is a really good example of that together alone. And so quite often what I'll do for these examples is set a timer, and we're going to be in silence for this amount of time and work with post-it notes. So this is an exercise called Rose, Thorn, Bud. And I want you to look at our question at the top here around how might we empower our team to, how did you manage to move that? How do we empower our team with the skills to facilitate effective requirements gathering workshops? And what I want you to do is think about that topic and fill in the different columns. So the rows is something that works well. So what works well when your teams are facilitating for effective requirements workshops? A thorn is what doesn't work well, like what's a real problem for you. And then a bud is what is something that you may need to upskill in. So, it has a lot of potential, but you maybe don't do it quite well yet. And it's something that you want to develop to help, empower so it's you or your team to facilitate effective requirements gathering workshops. And while you're doing this, I want you to have a think about, on the left-hand side, there's some tips here around some questions that can help you generate some of these ideas. And then also sometimes thinking about things in terms of what are the steps you go through to, for the example of gathering requirements. So often we do a bit of discovery, we do some preparation, we actually run the workshops, we document it, and sometimes there's a bit of a customer sign-off if you're doing a design document or a requirements document that needs sign-off. For the next 8 minutes or until I can see people get bored and stop writing ideas. So what you'll notice at this stage of the workshop, like I'm literally standing here watching you at the moment. But I think, as a facilitator, that's your role, right? So I'm not writing notes here with you, and I typically don't, as in this role in workshops. I might have colleagues with me, and then we obviously have the experts in the room, which are yourselves or the people that we're designing for. They're the ones you want to get most of the information from. And so here, I take this time when we've got the 10 minutes of time, I'll take this time to read what people are writing down, take it all in, maybe plan, in my head for the next exercise we'll go through. It just takes the stress and the pressure off being a facilitator, having to do everything at once. Okay, I'm starting to see things slow down a little bit here, so I might just give it another 30 seconds, and then I think we'll call it a day. I think we've got, a good bunch of ideas and notes down here. I encourage you to have a bit of a run through. Love it. Someone's put a rose, what works well, making it funny. I think, yeah, we get really serious in our work and making things fun. I haven't made this particularly fun, but if you go into, there's a website called Miroverse, which is basically where they have all the Miro templates. There's just a whole bunch of templates people put out there for free, and there's all sorts of quite fun ideas where they use kind of like a lot of pop culture and things just to make exercises fun, and especially around more, I guess, warm-ups. So sometimes it's really nice to do a warm-up with people, get to know people in your team, how do they work, those sorts of things. So I'm a big believer in making things as fun as possible. It doesn't have to be super dry and boring. Okay, I'm going to stop the timer there. I think we've done a great job. Thank you for all who have put all those ideas down. Feel free to take a look, especially at the roses, so that what are people doing that's working well for them. There's probably a few nuggets in there of gold. I like the use the icebreaker activity. Another good tip. Just I feel like people are coming in from the all in a weird headspace and they've been deep in some thought or whatever. An icebreaker kind of just helps them get into the mode of, hey, we're in workshop mode now. We're here to be a bit more creative and share ideas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unhide. It lets me unhide these voting dots. And so this is a technique which is very common in workshops like these, is we've now put down all these ideas, right? And it's a bit of a scatter gun of things all over the show. And it's really hard to know kind of what to focus on. And so typically you kind of use dot voting for maybe you've written down a whole bunch of problems. So it's a whole bunch of problems the end users are facing, but which problems are the most important ones to tackle? And then maybe you've put down a whole bunch of solutions to solve those problems, using Power Platform or Dynamics or a business application. Which of those solutions should we go forward with? Which ones should we focus on, because we can't do absolutely everything. So what I want you to do is I'll set a timer for, I'm going to give you a minute. And what I want you to do is to take as many red dots as you want. So I want to grab one and move it over to what you think. And let's go for roses. Let's go for positive things. We'll keep positive today. What are the things that make it, I guess, most important, or do you think are most effective? Sorry, probably a better way to frame it. Most effective ways of having a successful workshop. Actually, what we'll do is we'll do a voting round on roses, and then we'll do a voting round on thorns as well. So we'll give 30 seconds for roses, and then we'll do a voting round on thorns. And so what you see here is we now start to kind of build up this like a visual heat map of the things that people think are the most important or the most effective. And just a really good way of, it's not an exact science, but you get an understanding of what's important to the people in the workshop. And again, this comes back to having end users in the workshops. You're finding out what's most important to them. And what I find is that as you go through these workshops, so you get feedback, like really good feedback from the end users or the people, your clients, because they feel like they're being listened to, they're being heard, they're part of the design process. They actually really appreciate this. So let's just spend another minute, and we'll put some voting dots on the thorns. What are the things that you think are the biggest challenges for you when facilitating workshops? And while we're doing that, Alex, you've got a great question around, is there an integration between DevOps and Miro? There is, but you need to have an enterprise license. So I don't use it because I don't have an enterprise license for Miro. But if you do, if you're a larger organization, there is like an add-on for both Jira and for Azure DevOps, and you can basically have cards on the board here, which I kind of go through a bit more in my course, and then you can link those cards through to Azure DevOps, and they sync together. So when you change the description or who's the card assigned to in Azure DevOps, it reflects back here on the board. So here we can see, if we kind of look at where our heat map is, we've got 4 dots here on having the correct people in the workshop, getting engagement's important. In terms of thorns, lack of decision making. So that's where that decider role comes in. It forces a decision to be made, and it works really, really well, super effective. Incomplete info on the discovery documents, lack of preparation. Cool. All right, I'm going to just move us along. I'm just conscious of time. But hopefully you've seen here in this exercise, super effective way to get a lot of information down. Look at all of the sticky notes were filled in. Imagine if you were having to have discussions to get this stuff out, and you as a facilitator had to write every single one of those sticky notes. And this is literally what my friend was doing. He was asking them questions and would go, what is a successful thing that's working well for you? And he'd write the note for each person who would talk. And that would take literally, an hour or more. We've done this in 6 minutes. So super effective way of getting information from people. Okay. All right. So the last thing is a guided framework. And again, I'm just going to touch on this. There's more detail, but I've got this thing called a solution mapping framework. There is a blog post on that. So if you do want some more information on how that works, but essentially it takes what I've shown you today, the elements of that, the concepts around letting everyone have their say with sticky notes, using dot voting, and then I have some more pointed exercises around certain stages of this process. So for preparation, I've got things like a workshop canvas, which helps you plan your workshops. We use the stakeholder mapping to decide who should be there. Step 2 is just getting to understand the users. And so we do a couple of exercises around what we call expert interviews, which is a way of interviewing people, getting everyone to have their say, but then also getting other people to take notes for you based on those interviews, which is quite interesting. And also user journey maps is in that stage as well. So as a person goes through the current state process, what are they doing? What are they interacting with? What are their pain points? and then how do we overcome those pain points with solutions, which is like us kind of getting into the explore more, and we start to look at, well, usually customers or clients have chosen we're going to do this power platform with Dynamics or something. So they've got a high level understanding of what the technology will be, but then we explore what features of that do we use to solve the problems from the understand phase. And then step 4 is what I do is draw business process diagrams, so very visual here on Miro, and we tie those diagrams back to the backlog of user stories, and that's where if you can get an integration with Azure DevOps going, it works really well. So that's kind of my structured process, and it's in terms of how it works, very similar to what I took you through today. You just guide the users, the participants, sorry, through a series of steps through the workshops, asking them specific questions targeted at each of these different steps. So if you want to know more about that, as I say, there is a blog around this. I'm actually refining this framework on a regular basis, so the blog's probably not quite up to date with this new diagram, but the key concepts are there. Just want to get an idea of, did you find today useful? I guess looking for a little bit of feedback. Be bluntly as you want to be on this. If you don't think it was useful, that's completely fine. Because some of the things I've shown you here, some of it is it's kind of at the basic end of the scale. So some of you who have been using Miro for a while may not have learned a lot. But kind of good to know where people are in terms of their workshop skills and kind of what people are doing out there in the market. So it still looks like on average people have got something out of today.